Hi, my name is Jeff Scott from the Snow Valley Velo Club, and you're listening to the Group Ride Podcast.
Welcome to episode 20 of the Group Ride Podcast. This is a podcast for cycling in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. It's July, which means the big ride for the Pacific Northwest is quickly approaching, the Seattle to Portland ride. In this episode, I recap how my first STP ride and crash went in all its glory. Clip in, riders, the Group Ride Podcast is rolling out. In episodes 1 and 3 of the show, I chronicled how I got started in cycling after losing 80 pounds in about 10 months. The reward to myself for accomplishing this was to buy a road bike, and before I could even buy one, a friend convinced me to sign up for the 204-mile Seattle to Portland ride. By June of that year, I was an everyday bike commuter, about 10 miles each direction on protected trails near my house. I was getting faster and stronger, and every ride was amazing. I was experiencing that state of cycling zen, when your body starts to adapt to the work and your brain starts to really crave the endorphin rush from pushing hard. 5 weeks prior to my attempt to ride 204 miles to Portland, I wrapped up my very first century, the Flying Wheels of Redmond, in June. I was feeling good, so I went into full planning mode. I'm an over-prepper, so I began researching the route through Google Street View and reading as many ride reports from previous years as I could get my hands on. I tested out different bag combinations for my rack and watched YouTube videos on tire pressure and rolling resistance. And it wasn't just the bike and route planning that were in full swing. I was also evaluating my nutrition on the ride. I had developed a taste for Cliff Bars, but in a number of rides prior, I found them hard to eat while on the go. Of course, my research binge brought me to the conclusion that I needed to eat every 15 minutes on this ride. This meant that I couldn't wait for each rest stop, so I needed to find a reliable delivery method for my Cliff Bars. I spent a non-trivial amount of time testing out different ways to cut up Cliff Bars into small, bite-sized chunks that I could quickly access and eat at 16 miles an hour. I finally settled on cutting up each bar into 12 cubes and separating each piece with parchment paper. For STP, I chopped up about 12 Cliff Bars this way and added them to my growing sack of stuff to take on the ride. I went on a few training rides with my friend Bill, who had convinced me to register in the first place. This was his first STP as well. As the Saturday approached, we finalized our plan. We would go 125 miles on the first day and 79 miles on the second day. Along the way, I set up a few geofence alerts on my phone to automatically tweet when I entered a specific rest area on the route. I also grabbed a few video interviews with Bill and myself between scarfing down cookies and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at the rest stops.
Here we are at the first rest stop at REI's corporate headquarters.
So far, feeling pretty good. Looking pretty good. It's crazy busy. People are making some crazy moves on the road, though.
All right, how's it going, Bill?
It's going good. Making a good time.
How you feeling?
Feeling good.
How the legs?
Legs are okay.
All right.
Except for the wash things.
How's the butt?
The butt's fine.
All right, here we are at rest stop 2. This is lunch. This is the Spanaway Middle School. Tons of people here. Sun's out finally. It's getting to get hot. All right, Bill. How's it going so far? This rest stop 2 is lunch.
Feeling good. Two accidents within, 54 miles so far.
Yeah, none of them us, though. That's okay, I guess.
I'm going to cut in now and tell a little story. On the way to the McKenna Elementary School rest stop, there was a bit of an incident. After leaving Spanaway, riders head down Washington Route 7 for about 2 miles. Also known as Pacific Avenue South, this is a 4-lane highway with a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. It has a bike lane on each side and a middle turning lane throughout. This road is wide, which means drivers typically speed. The 40-mile-an-hour speed limit was most certainly not being adhered to by the speeding drivers flying by us. This stretch of road caused a bit of a traffic jam in the bike lanes because it was unsafe to pass slower riders in almost all situations. Once we turned off onto Spanaway-McKenna Highway, the road conditions and traffic improved, but this also caused a bit of a pressure valve release effect on the hundreds of riders stacked up on Washington Route 7. As the speeds increased, so did the passing and frustrations from riders who were only recently freed up from the traffic jam. This resulted in dangerous passes by solo riders and large groups alike. Those who were not passing were oftentimes trying to create makeshift pace lines with strangers to make up lost time. This powder keg of bad behavior found itself right on top of Bill and I as we were making our way to McKenna. As a somewhat new rider in large groups, I was not accustomed to having unknown riders inches from my back wheel. This made me nervous as hell, and I found myself checking my mirror frequently as a result. At the time, I had a bar-end mounted mirror, which meant each mirror check required me to look down. I was following Bill's wheel with about a half a wheel gap between mine and his. A pack of 3 to 4 riders in a much faster group passed us on the left. Since there was still a steady flow of cars on the road, people passing were weaving in and out of the shoulder quickly. The group who passed us was eager to get out of the way of the cars approaching from behind and came by us and moved over quickly. Something must have happened to force the front group to slow, because the last person in the group slotted right in front of Bill, slamming on his brakes to avoid hitting the person in front of them, who had also slowed for some reason. Bill and I had worked on hand signals before the ride and had planned to verbalize emergency signals as well. This was certainly needed, as Bill yelled out, "Slowing!" as he grabbed a handful of brakes to avoid hitting the person in front of him. At this exact moment, my eyes were squarely in my mirror, worrying about the guy behind me and wondering when he was going to get off my ass and pass me. My head snapped up and I immediately knew I had to execute a bailout. My brain chose to veer left since there was a ditch to the right, opting for the possibility of car contact over the absolute of going headfirst into the unknown depths of the drainage system. My front wheel came into contact with Bill's rear wheel, and my left side exit was now accelerated greatly as I lost most control of my bike. Somehow, and I don't know how, I stayed upright long enough to detach from Bill's rear wheel and lay the bike down on the street rather than going over the bars. As I slid on my butt on the asphalt, my brain must have remembered what was in the background of my mirror just before Bill had yelled. I knew a car would be bearing down on me, and I was still sliding. I reached up and grabbed my head and pulled it towards my knees like I was about to be in a plane crash. I'm glad to say that the car I had seen in my mirror was paying great attention to what was unfolding in front of them and had gotten on their brakes much sooner than I had. I sat in the middle of the road with my bike about 15 feet in front of me, watching the group of 4 that had caused this to ride off and seeing Bill look both terrified and relieved all at once. I picked up my bike and we limped it to the side of the road as I started to assess the damage to it and myself. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I dumped the bike at almost 20 miles an hour, but I felt no pain. My bike was in one piece, and the only issue I could find was my front wheel being out of true. Bill managed to stay upright during the ordeal, but his rear wheel was also damaged by my quick release lever coming into contact with his spokes. After evaluating our option of calling my wife for a pickup, riding back to Spanaway, or continuing on, we slowly worked our way to the McKenna Elementary School rest stop, which was about 9 miles away. At the rest stop, the fine folks at Montlake Bicycle got both of our wheels trued up and ready to go, while we discussed the next issue we faced. When did we tell my wife that I crashed? The rest of the 2-day ride went pretty smoothly, so let's pick up where I left off with the rest stop interviews.
All right, Bill, what do you think about Centralia?
They got creamsicles.
Free creamsicles. That's the only reason we stopped. We didn't plan on stopping here, but free creamsicles.
They make you stop and they make you take the creamsicle.
Not a bad plan.
All right, so I made it to Vader. 125 miles, 7 hours, 41 minutes, 16.3 miles per hour average. Not bad, but I am beat. Tomorrow is easier, only 75 miles to Portland.
All right, made it to Riverside Park. We are 142 miles in, grabbing some quick food and heading back to Portland.
Started about 15 minutes late today, but we're making up a good time on the road. Should be in Portland by 1 or 2.
All right, here we are at the last rest stop of the day, St. Helens High School. We are 27 miles away from Portland, and we're hitting the fatigue wall. Bill and I both are hurting bad. All right, Bill, we're about 25 miles away from Portland. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good because I thought it was 33 miles away.
Well, that's not very much, though. So, how are your legs?
The legs are okay.
How's your shoulders?
No.
No good at all.
They're no.
All right, made it to Portland. I'm alive.
How you feel?
Made it. Feel very good. Feel good.
Nice.
So in the end, I'd have to say that my first STP was an amazing experience, even with the crash. It's one of those once-in-a-lifetime adventures that I think every Pacific Northwest cyclist should consider. While the scenery isn't the best and the elevation profile is pretty flat and unremarkable, the ride is a landmark event in Washington that everyone should do at least once. After finishing my first STP in 2 days, I immediately began my training for my one-day attempt the next year. More on that and my cycling story overall on a future episode of the show. Thanks for listening to episode 20 of the Group Ride Podcast. To send me feedback about the show, ask a question, or request that I cover a specific topic, contact me on Twitter and Instagram at The Group Ride Pod, or on Facebook at The Group Ride Podcast. If you want to be on the show or just leave a voicemail, you can call me at 206-651-4161. If you enjoy the show and think others will too, please share it with your friends and give us a rating in your podcast player of choice. I'm your host, Wes Salmon. See you on the next Group Ride.